Hey, welcome back into IAT Agriculture. I'm Britton Rucker. As we get into the 2024 growing season, lots of eyes are on two things. That's fertilizer and diesel prices. We're joined now with Extension Farm Management Specialist Gregg Ibendahl from Kansas State University to give us a little insight into what the year might have in store for us in the farming and ranching community. Gregg, welcome to the program.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. All right. We know fertilizer prices reached historic levels in 2022 due to high demand fueled by strong commodity prices. Will we possibly see anything of that nature again this year?
No, I don't really think so. I have a model that actually predicts fertilizer prices, and it's based on the corn price, the oil price, and inflation expectations. And all those factors are below what they were back in 2022. So I don't really think we're looking at that kind of pricing going on in the future. Now, last year, prices kind of went down during the winter, and I don't think that's going to happen this year either. They're kind of about at the level they should be, and I kind of expect them to be steady during the rest of the year.
Well, geopolitical issues such as the Israel-Hamas war and the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine play into any uncertainty on fertilizer markets?
Well, certainly the Russian-Ukraine war has the potential to do that. Russia is one of the world's biggest exporters of fertilizer. They export all three of the major commodities, so that's always a factor that would be interrupted. Even though we don't really import a whole lot directly from Russia, they do have an effect on the world prices for those things. And the other side of that is they're also one of the world's biggest exporters of oil, and oil is one of my big factors in my model here. So if oil prices will go up, I would expect a jump up in fertilizer prices as well.
Yeah, let's get into that. Let's get into diesel prices. What do you anticipate we should expect in 2024 on that end?
Well, again, the diesel price is highly tied to what the oil price is. So as long as the oil price stays where it is, and that's really what the futures market is showing us right now, that they expect steady oil prices going forward. If that's the case, diesel prices will kind of stay the same too. But in my opinion, the world market really hasn't fully incorporated the risk from the Russian-Ukraine war into their pricing, because when the Russian-Ukraine war first started, oil prices got up to $130 per barrel. You know, it's currently in the $70 range now, and I don't really think traders really have priced in the full risk of that war into that, because if something would happen, again, we could see oil prices jump back up, and we would see a corresponding big increase in diesel prices.
Gregg, what's the big takeaway you would like producers to keep in mind as we head into the busy season?
Well, again, I don't think traders have fully priced in the risk of everything on the oil market and fertilizer prices into the prices. So I don't really see much chances of prices going much lower during the course of the year. There may be some gradual decrease in diesel prices. There's a much higher risk of things going higher. So normally February is the best month to buy diesel fuel if we look at it on a historical basis, because prices tend to be lower in February than they are during the rest of the year. So buying diesel fuel now would be a good thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is fertilizer is the producer's second biggest expense category outside of machinery. So, you know, keep an eye on fertilizer prices. I don't expect much downward trend in that, but again, the upside risk is pretty large.
Well, Gregg, thanks so much for coming on. Everyone stick around. We'll be back with more IAT Agriculture.